TCU continues their trend of landing physical players by getting Devan Robinson out of Pasadena Memorial, a big offensive lineman.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 years. Frogs continue their hot streak on the recruiting trail for the 2026 class. We'll also talk today about the Big 12 partnering with PayPal for revenue sharing payments. Texas State joining the Pac-12. Will that affect TCU in their recruiting at all? But we begin with news on the recruiting trail again. 2026 prospect Devan Robinson from Pasadena Memorial has committed to TCU. He plays tackle right now, but he'll be moving to the guard spot. He stands at 6'2", 330 pounds. I think he's an interior offensive lineman at the next level. The thing that stands out about Robinson when you watch him play, this is the dude that plays with a mean streak. Like when he fires off the ball, he's driving his feet. He's trying to dump people on their head. He gets to the second level. He seems pretty good at pulling and getting up, to linebackers and safeties, pulling around the formation at times. But when he's lined up in front of somebody and it's a run play, he's engaging, locking on, driving his feet, and a lot of pancake blocks on his highlight tape. A lot of throwing people to the ground and laying on top of them. Even in pass pro, there are multiple times where he would get in his pass set. He would get to a place where he felt like he was in a good spot leverage-wise, and he would just throw his guy down on the ground and lay on top of him. Looks to be the prototypical interior offensive lineman that you want. I talked about this on Monday's show, I believe. TCU landed 3 2026 players over last weekend, and one of them was Braden Bach, who was a tight end at Argyle, and he chose TCU over Kansas State, Kansas, a few other schools. But Bach was another player that on his highlight film, a lot of pancake blocks, a lot of throwing people on the ground. And I think this team in general, they need more physicality. Now, hopefully this year that shines through with some of the depth that they have now on the defensive line, with some of the players they've added offensive line wise, because they've shuffled that around a little bit. But one of the questions I had about Sonny Dykes when he took the job from SMU, my sort of perception of him was, known for high flying offenses, right? Always known to be a guy that knows how to put points on the board. Teams at SMU seem to kind of taper off towards the end of the year. And it felt like they didn't have that grittiness, that toughness. But then in year one, we saw a team that was incredibly mentally tough and had a physicality about them. Like they brought the wood each and every week on offense, reestablished in line of scrimmage, driving people off the ball, opening up holes for Marty Mercado and Kentre Miller. On defense, the way they tackled, the way they got after people at times. And I said, well, maybe I got this wrong. And in the last 2 years, I feel like we've seen a team that hasn't always answered the bell when it comes to the physical nature of the game, right? And so I think going back to year one, that team had a good merger, or I guess transition, from the Gary Patterson years where they were known for having a chip on their shoulder, playing with a nasty streak, playing with physicality. And then they got a new coach in that sort of was more hands-off, let them be themselves, let them relax a little bit. And I think it paid off, and you saw the physicality shine through, but you still saw a team that really enjoyed kind of the new vibe that was around the program. But since then, I don't think they've struck that balance really well. I'm encouraged, though, by the type of players that TCU is going after, both in the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail, because I think it shows an emphasis on, okay, we have to be better in the trenches. We have to find a way to establish a run game and stop the run. Because those are the two things. I mean, like, we can talk about a lot of different things. Yeah, they turned the ball over too. They didn't always play complementary football. But if they stop the run and run the ball more effectively, I think they win the UCF game. I think they win the Houston game. And so then you're talking about 10-2. And I guess you could argue Baylor as well. Like that was a game where they were right there. They just could not find a way to slow down Bryson Washington. Bottom line, they have to get better in those areas. And so now for 2026, you got 3 offensive line prospects. Vincent Johnson Jr., tackle from Sulphur Springs, who also there's some chatter about maybe him moving inside. Jordan Burnett, who's a tackle from Missouri City. And I think he's a true like OT. And then now Devan Robinson from Pasadena, who looks to be like your prototypical big physical guard that you can run behind in short yardage situations or just in general, right? So I really like this pickup. Robinson picked TCU over Baylor, Texas Tech, Houston. He took official visits this summer to Baylor, Stanford, and Houston. So that's significant. On Wednesday, I was discussing how BYU had landed a 5-star quarterback. And I talked about how moving forward, it felt like BYU was one of those schools in the Big 12 that you're going to have to keep your eye on because I think they have the potential with the passionate fan base they have, with the money that they have, with their association with the LDS Church, and that being a nationwide brand for them, to really recruit at a high level on a consistent basis in the Big 12. And one of my friends brought up a good point after that episode dropped. He was like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think BYU and TCU are going to go head-to-head in many recruiting battles. And I would agree with that. I mean, BYU is going to focus mainly on the West Coast. Those will be that's going to be the area where they invest most of their resources. Ryder Lyons, that 5-star quarterback, he does have a connection with the LDS Church, so that's a factor too. They're always going to have the upper hand with kids that have an association with that faith. And so TCU and BYU, I mean, there'll be the occasional battle. I think in the portal from time to time you might see, because TCU has had a nice little run here of a few guys from Cal, a couple West Coast guys. But by and large, when we talk about high school recruiting, TCU is going to do 90% of their work in the state of Texas. And BYU will probably dip into Texas from time to time because everybody in the country does. But I don't think they'll be going head-to-head very often. So these are the types of recruiting battles that are important and will become even more important as we go down the line through the new Big 12, because you're going to be competing against Baylor and Texas Tech and Houston for most of these players. Like if you've identified a player as an impact dude, there's a good chance that those 3 schools are at least considering adding them to. Landing him is a really good job by this coaching staff. AJ Ricker, I think this is a big year for him. You know, they brought in Randy Clements. They're trying to improve and get better and more consistent on the offensive line. I will give him credit. This has been a really good offseason for him as far as recruiting goes so far. Vincent Johnson Jr. is a legit prospect. Devan Robinson right now is rated as a 3-star prospect. He's a very high 3-star. Like he's on the edge of being a 4-star talent. I think he could get a bump at some point during the senior season. And also it's like he's so close. I mean, we're kind of splitting hairs there. How much does it really factor into the equation we're talking about? This is the type of talent. If this program is going to be consistently good, you have to be good up front. And I still think there'll be some peaks and valleys. The hope is that you get to a place where your valley years are more like 8-4, 9-3, like last season. It was sort of a reshuffling, resetting type of season. They had some growing pains early, and then they closed really strong, right? This year should be you're in the mix for playing in Arlington at the Big 12 championship game. And then next year we'll see what happens. A lot depends on what does Josh Hoover do? What do some of these other guys do, right? But the best way to keep your program consistent is to be good on the O-line and D-line. Because even if you don't have, if you got some transition at the skill player spots, you can survive if you protect your quarterback well and you're able to open up run lanes. And also, just frankly, there's always going to be a bunch of kids in the state of Texas that can play receiver and running back and that fit what TCU wants to do currently on offense. It's much tougher to find talented, physical offensive linemen. And I think my biggest encouragement about where TCU is right now and how they're set up for the future is that this coaching staff seems to understand the priority of we have to be good up front. So they land another player. We'll see where they go next. Offensive line's been a big emphasis. I know Rhett Gray, a tackle from Weatherford, is a player that they're very interested in, according to Jeremy Clark from 247 Sports. We'll keep tabs on that when we come back. The Big 12 has decided how they're going to pay players. I'll tell you why that's good news for TCU next year on Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. I really like the Gametime app. It's super easy to use. I mean, 2 or 3 clicks and you have tickets. Have you decided at the last minute to head to the ball game with your family? One of the things I loved about being at TCU was I was always 20 or 30 minutes from a Ranger game, and the Rangers were bad at the time. So it was pretty easy to find tickets and get them. But I wish you had the Gametime app back then, because it literally is. You go on the app, you find your seats. They show you a picture of what you're going to see from where you're sitting. And then 2 taps of a button and you have tickets on your phone. You don't have to wonder where they went. They come straight to you on your phone. You just take it to the event. Last minute tickets, great deals. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's LOCKEDONCollege as a promo code for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Terms do apply. Terms and conditions, as always, apply. Gametime, if you need last minute tickets, is the best app to use. So on Friday, Get Up, which is ESPN's morning show, they took a break from debating LeBron's legacy and talking about Dak Prescott and the Cowboys to actually discuss some college sports in the middle of the summer, which was kind of exciting. They talked to a PayPal executive and Brett Yormark. The Big 12 has partnered with PayPal. That is how they're going to pay their student athletes in revenue sharing. Why is that important to the fans? Well, there's a couple things I wanted to highlight here. One, I was just sort of surprised. I mean, I figured that would be some sort of direct deposit system. I guess in today's world, like Brett Yormark said, 90% of their student athletes use PayPal in some capacity, and most of them that's how they pay their rent. You know, that's how they split up rent. That's how they pay for food. I get that, right? So this is an easy and simple way, I guess, to seamlessly transition for the student athletes themselves. But PayPal has a partnership with the Big 12 and the Big 10. And Mike Greenberg, who doesn't watch college sports but pretends to on occasion for these conversations, he obviously had an agenda with his line of questioning. It wasn't even really a line of questioning. He just kind of asked the same question over and over again. He kept saying it's been the Wild West in college sports for the last few years, which is true. I mean, that's kind of a generic thing to say at this point, but yeah, it's largely true. And he wanted to get Yormark or the executive from PayPal, which I don't know why he would admit to this or say anything about it, to reassure him that this was another step in the direction of creating a uniform system. And Greenberg's point was, if all the conferences have a deal with PayPal and Venmo, then doesn't that get us one step closer to a world where we all kind of know what the rules are and what's happening in college athletics when it comes to paying these athletes? Which, I mean, in some ways, yes, I think that's true. But the question we all have is, it's not so much how they're going to get paid, even though I do think this is an encouraging sign. And it's another reminder of what we're stepping into starting in July with revenue sharing, it's another instance where there's a whole new world and there's so many details. Like we all have these ideas in theory, like, oh yeah, we should just pay student athletes through revenue sharing, which is a great idea. And athletic directors have been preparing for it now for months. Like Mike Buddy and TCU, they've been preparing for this. They've been kind of acting like this is the world we're moving towards for a while. There's just so many details that have to be ironed out, like once that happens. And this is one of them. But the question we all have is, are these schools going to honor the new system? Because with NIL, it still exists, but is now supposed to be approved. NIL deals are now supposed to be approved if they're over $600 by a third-party clearinghouse system called NIL Go. And they will give the schools and the student athlete, based on an algorithm and the things they study and break down, the data they have given to them, they will give the student athlete and the school or the company a monetary range. Like, hey, here's what this NIL deal is worth. And the thought process is, if they do that, then we will start getting away from what we have right now, which is just like, hey, we got a donor that wants to pay for a good softball team. Let's find the best softball players. Let's create a slush fund, pay them all this money, and get the best talent, right? And I mean, I'm not blaming those schools for doing that. They're working within the rules that were given to them. But this new system is only going to work, and it's only going to be advantageous for everybody if everyone respects the new way of the world, right? If the Blue Bloods end up going back to the days of money under the table, or they find a way around this NIL clearinghouse situation, then we'll be right back where we started. But if everybody's on the same page and they honor these new regulations, then yeah, we should be in a place where hopefully there's more standards and practices when it comes to compensating these athletes. And I think that would really benefit TCU, especially when we're talking about the Big 12. Because yeah, recruiting like on a nationwide scale, it's important. I want TCU to have the best players in the country, but more focused. Like the priority for TCU, again, as I talked about in the last segment, beating Texas Tech on the recruiting trail, taking down Baylor on the recruiting trail, like winning those battles, winning against Houston, winning against Oklahoma State, SMU. You got to win those battles. If you're going to win conference titles equals playoff berths. And then when you get to the playoffs, you see what happens. Hopefully, from a talent standpoint, you're at a place where you have a fighting chance against the other schools that are there. But first things first, you got to win a conference title. How do you do that? You win those battles that I was talking about. TCU has a lot to offer as a university, as a programs in the Big 12. Great location, great facilities, commitment to winning, commitment to being the best, administration that cares about sports, all of that. They need a little help from the powers that be. It feels like it's coming down the pipe now, but everybody's got to respect the new situation. But Bray Yormark, the Big 12, apparently going to compensate their athletes through PayPal. And starting July 1st, we'll have a better idea of what this is going to look like moving forward. So I guess that's on Tuesday. I'm excited. I'm excited to see the changes implemented here in the near future, just to get a sense of where we're going next. When we come back, Texas State moving to the Pac-12. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. So realignment continues. Now things have slowed down a little bit. There was a moment last year where it felt like the ACC might fall apart. Florida State and Clemson were publicly talking about how they weren't happy in their marriage with the ACC and the TV deal that they were locked into through 2036 and how unfair it was. But ultimately, at least for now, they've decided they don't want to make any moves, right? The Big Ten and the SEC, never say never, but it doesn't appear that they are super active or ambitious in adding any more teams right now. There's currently negotiations happening about the future of the playoff and what the system's going to look like. And even though I don't think it's totally fair to all four conferences, all four power conferences are involved in some form or fashion in these negotiations. But realignment is still happening because one thing I don't think we always consider, like when the Big 12 dipped into the American Conference a few years ago after Texas and OU left to grab Houston and UCF and to go get, and they didn't get them from the American Conference, but to go get BYU as well. Like when they did those things, suddenly, when we got Cincinnati, suddenly the American Conference is like, well, now we got to add, right? So they go to the Sun Belt or to the Conference USA, and then those conferences have to add. So there's constantly that movement going on, even down to like the D2, the D3 level, FCS. So the Pac-12, Oregon State and Washington State, the two schools that stuck around and played basically an outlaw schedule, played the Mountain West teams, had their rivalry games last year. They are rebuilding the Pac-12. They're going for it. They're doing it. They added some teams from the Mountain West, most notably Boise State. And they need one more member to make it to 8 and have 8 full members for football, which would give them the potential to have an automatic qualifier in the college football playoff. So they've reportedly reached out to Texas State. They've hashed out some details, and they're going to add the Bobcats. Now, there will be an official vote by the Texas State board on Monday, but I can't imagine that they would balk at this. Like, I think they're excited about it. And good for Texas State. I mean, G.J. Kinney is a really good coach. They've invested in a number of sports. Like, they've been good at baseball for a while now. Football is slowly gotten to a place where they've been pretty solid. And they've used the portal well. I mean, when we talk about, like, mid-majors or G5 schools, yes, they lose a lot to the portal, but they also have the advantage of, and Sonny Dykes did this when he was at SMU, players that go the Power 4 route and it doesn't work out, they get that crop of talent too. And it's a good sell to be like, hey, come here, you can come back home, you can play. We'll help you get right. And so Texas State's done a good job with that. They beat Baylor a few years ago in non-conference play. Solid team, solid program. So good for them. How does it affect TCU? I don't think it has a huge effect on TCU now. They've got something to sell more in recruiting at this time. But it's sort of similar to what I was talking about with BYU. Obviously, Texas State's still going to do a lot of their recruiting in Texas. This gives them a new region to recruit. Like, I'm sure they're going to go California, Utah, other areas in the West Coast, Arizona, be like, hey, come play here. And, you know, your parents can come see you play because we'll be out in this area on a consistent basis. But I don't think it has a huge effect on TCU because I don't feel like they're going to be targeting the same players. Now, I could be wrong about that. Maybe they make a big swing and they're going after, you know, the types of 4-star, high 3-star talents that TCU is. And that's something they have to fend off. But my initial reaction is that it's going to be different clientele that these two schools are pursuing, both in the transfer portal and in the high school recruiting ranks. We'll be back on Monday, and starting next week, we're back to 5 days a week because we'll be going into July. So thank you for rocking with me through the month of June. Appreciate you guys. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel.